Okay, so we had, I think, an interesting day. Uh, there were not a lot of events, though. We just had a couple, and we're getting one more here into the close. And so I wanted to just go over what's going on right here so that we can get an idea what's happening over the weekend, and then just take a really high level look at the week. Okay, so the first thing is right off the open, you can see the market gapped pretty decent way up here. So this move down was a trap. We were able to wipe out this position overnight, to liquidate them, and then there was a news event that helped push this even further to gap up. So in this condition, you want to take a look at it and ask yourself, well, what do we want to see? And remember, the bulls want to pump this up. And I think that I want a different color. Maybe I get like a stronger color or something. I don't know. This one. No, they're always like, I don't know, not intense. Yellow, I guess. Okay, we'll use that. All right, so the bulls want to pump this up, right? So what do they need to do? What do you need to do in order to pump tension? Liquidate the counterparty. Right off the open, you can see decay moves positive. We have trap orders. There's a small amount of bearish liquidity right off the open. Take a look. Tension moves flat. Fail. Decay dips under here. There's your trapped orders associated with this signal. So you get here's the signal. It's the signal. There's the volume. So there's a negative number. The sellers sell the market. They fill it and look at tension. You can see tension starts moving, price moves, and the bulls hit. At this moment, it is clear. The bears just failed. They didn't get tension under zero yesterday, and there was huge concerns that yesterday's dip was just a massive trap. And today, it was pretty clear at the open that it was a big trap. And seeing the bears fail right off the open, the market immediately says, hey, let's liquidate these guys, see how far up we can get it, pump tension, all done. So the market moves up. We get a nice just parabolic move, which couldn't continue, so it stopped. Tension pumps higher, and now we're getting this. You see, if you had drawn this here and you'd said, oh, it looks like that, and we're getting a sample right now, and there is no volume. So we're waiting for trapped orders, and the market closes. We don't get volume into the close. So the bulls get a tentative sample into the close. The bulls were in control here. The bulls were in control yesterday, except for the elastic trap. And that's where we're at. We have tension up at 66% into the close. So there's a lot of counterforce going on here. What needs to happen again is we need, in this instance, to find, when the market opens next week, the market's going to need to find a mechanism to rise. At these levels of tension, 66, right? 66, that's a lot. That's way, we're getting to the point where that you need some news events. You need something dramatic that can get people crazy about it. To drive things up higher, maybe 70, 80% would be insane. And that seems like a lot of work to do. I think it makes more sense for the bulls after this big trap and pop up, and then, I mean, they're getting everything they want, to start trying to look at elasticity again. Now, this last time, right through here, this section, there was no elasticity, even though the bears did their very best. They just did their very best and were able to bring this down. It was unapproved. Bulls did not give the nod until right into the close, if you remember that, right here. And then that's all the bears were able to, in an approved sense, accomplish before it was just over. So these bulls need, again, the bears to come in and get trapped. And now I'm starting to think that at this point, the bears came in yesterday and they got motivated. I mean, that was tough. I was wondering how they're going to pull it off. How do you get bears to get motivated to come in? And they did, and then they got burned. Well, now the market's getting to the point where these bears, the ones that got trapped here, the ones that have just gotten pummeled. They have gone through. They lost. They were wrong. Now they just got crushed. I mean, they're getting just destroyed left and right. They're not getting any advantage in the market. And the best they've seen was yesterday. Every other day has just wiped them out. Yesterday they had 2 positions. They had the one here and the one here. And that's it. That's all that they had. And then they were able to get that nod down. And so yesterday was probably I think we're up and running, right? Nobody said anything. So, okay. Was probably the best that they've seen. Getting two positions in there before getting turned upside down was pretty good for them. Yeah, so we're getting the bulls showing up at the close, not getting the sample. This is going to be interesting. So I think going into next week, the mentality here is going to be maybe a legitimate burn off, because we haven't given the bears anything legitimate yet, right? Like, they just had to try really hard yesterday. So maybe I think it might make sense on Monday. We see the market could sample those bulls again. They miss. And I think if this gap down right at the open and moved down and said, okay, these bulls didn't buy into the close and it just moved down and we don't see them make money, then what we could say is, oh, well, the bulls have stepped out of the way, and perhaps really quickly when the market opens, we could get a sample and the bears could start running some approved elasticity. They have to get that approved. And the way you do that is you see the controlling party step out of the way and do nothing. Then you grab liquidity and you run that down. So the scope on that would be this distance for tension, not price, for tension getting there. However far that they can make price go with that amount of tension available to burn through is how far they can get it. So I think that might not be too crazy to think now. I mean, we've seen the bears use every trick they can think of, and yesterday they just tried to use brute force. It's getting to the point where you might want to say, okay, we'll give you some official control of the market so you guys can feel important again, kind of thing. And that might be coming in next week. I'm going to be keeping that in mind because we've just seen so much blatant crushing of the bears that, I mean, you got to give them a little something or they just quit. And if they quit, well, that just means pushing the market up hard. So that's where I'm at thinking about that. If you're going to consider that, take a look at this position here. And you'll want to say, where would you liquidate, if you were trying to hop in here, but we didn't have trapped orders. So it's really tough to think that. Most likely you'd probably be down here, probably around this spot here. I'd focus in on that little dip right there. I think that's where I would have a stop, and I'd say, well, if we got under there, I'd probably unwind and say, all right, I was wrong. And that's what I'd be looking for the open next week. And if price just never goes back up, I might start leaning towards, all right, let's look at elasticity. I think it's starting to make sense. If we open up flat or higher or something like that, then we're going to need to sample those bulls again. You see what I'm saying? Like I'm saying, if this plays out just right, this sample, and we see the overnight market just do this, and maybe the Sunday open, it opens here, and it just never goes up, I'm going to start looking at this sample right here as potentially a nod for Monday. So the bears could just come in and start selling this down and start riding elasticity, which could be advantageous for both parties after this. It's pretty clear after the market ran out these bears again, that the bears are getting a little tired of playing. They just stopped. So maybe we could get some more. It's going to be hard to tell. Over the weekend's going to be tough, but I do think that the bulls have established they're in control. This is how close the bears could get that's all that was permitted. That's all that was allowed. It's the bulls are in control here, and until we see the change in that character, you need to remember that when you frame things. Remember the controlling party's the bulls, counterparty's the bears. So that's where we're at. Overall for the week, what have we seen all week this week? it has just been a slaughter for the bears. We saw this whole thing started way back here, where the bears tried to cheat. It sort of worked-ish, and then but it didn't. Cheating's an ineffective strategy. They tried to do it again, and that ended up in the bulls getting a bluff. If you remember this, they were buying in, and the bears were getting very hopeful, and I thought that was a bluff, and they bluffed the market. We had some news come in, and they picked it up, and then the bears just got turned inside out over, and then this day they got a double position, and then a huge aggressive trap for all sellers and bears right here. It is a slaughter. Nothing during this entire week has ever said the bears had any influence in this market. They have been in the driver's seat. They have the whole time been at the behest of the bulls. The bulls got to determine if the bears were allowed to participate or if they weren't, what was going on. The bulls have had just a very strong amount of control in this market. So that's important to note. The way that can change next week is if we start to see the bulls, the steam runs out and the bulls are wanting to let the bears get some elastic markets. And if the bears can bring this down and find some holes in the armor, that will be the first place the bears can take advantage of potentially gaining control of this market. But just remember, while the prices might do a lot of things, this is going to take a day or two at best. At best, this will take 2 days before the bears could potentially get control of the market. And it would have to be really aggressive, and it would have to tick off a lot of check marks before the control's really handed over. And we know that bearish markets like to come back. So if we see this move down too aggressive, there's a really good chance it'll probably come a lot of the way back up before the bears actually exerted a whole lot of control in favor of the bearish side. So there's a lot going on here. Mostly this has just been a slaughter fest, just destroying bears up and down. The bullish market is really, really, really strong. That we saw really strong bullishness for the past 2 weeks about. So that's where we're at for the weekly view going into next week. I tried to map out just about what it's going to look like to get the bears into some elasticity, and that could potentially start getting things to get more complicated. The issue that we're going to run into now is complexity. If you have, when your opponent wants to play, they're like, let me in, I want to play, let's do this. It's easy to create drama and complexity and make things happen. But when you have just slaughtered the opposing party, you run into this issue where they don't really want to play. You start to see where a lot of retail traders, the uninformed traders who think that markets are one way but they're really the other, that they're all in already. So they're all done selling, and the only thing left to do is just blow off the top, just destroy anything possibly left. And that could have been today, sure, I don't know. I'm not tracking anything like that. But the idea is that once everybody's trapped in, there's only one thing left to do, which is hit the stops, and then after that, there's nothing left to do but to start to create more conflict. And the only way to create conflict is to create precedences. You need a precedence. You need to say, oh, well, look, there's a downside here because of that downside and that, and look at this. And you create this world where the bears have precedence. And it doesn't mean it's fake, but it means that we need to build that. It's that you have to wait for that to kind of get built. And then you see the bulls have a precedence. And then we start to create the conflict between the two parties. And what your job is to do is not to participate in the conflict, it's to get above the conflict and to see what's going on so you can see the overall trend and how it's developing and who's actually in control. And that's, I think, what we're going to be looking at next week is we've just beat the bears to death and they might want a breath. And so we're going to need something to tell them they can keep going. It's okay. And elasticity is good for that. It gives a little bit of profit back to the counterparty to make sure that they're still getting their fix so that they come back. And that's where I'm thinking this is likely headed next week, is just to make sure we get that. Um, yeah. So I think this was a good week. I had a good time. It was a lot of fun to be able to do some more of these streams. If you have questions and stuff, let me know. If you're not following along with the analysis, then you should be asking questions. Like if you're not saying to yourself, yeah, that makes sense. I understand where you're seeing the liquidity. I see how that you're building these narratives. If you're not to that point, then you should be asking questions. And if you are to that point, you should be trying to say what I'm going to say before I say it. You should be able to come to these same conclusions before me. And then we just validate each other to say, okay, you came to that conclusion. And if we disagree, that's a good thing. We can talk about it and work through to hopefully get a better, a third opinion that's better than the previous two. And that's where we all got to be. You got to be to the point where that you can already know what the narrative is before you hear it from somebody else, and you can already see what the opportunities are likely going to be before somebody else, and then we can step forward and start creating that greater thing, which is where we all work together to get a bigger narrative out of the market than just our own little perspectives. So okay, so Happy's just asking the Discord. He said, will the Bears be that dumb? Yes, they will. And you also have to remember that if the whole issue this whole time is that the Bears have been too eager. They keep trying to get in before the elasticity, before the Bulls give the nod. They keep trying to. Remember yesterday the Bears tried to sell here, and it was too early, and they got wiped out. And then there was some liquidity that showed up here, and they pumped and they pumped. And this was premature. And then finally they got a nod, and the trap had to do with the fact the Bears were just early. And they did that the previous 2 days. So it's the problem they've been having is they have too much eagerness. And that eagerness, that enthusiasm, that overconfidence is being converted into cash on the other side. So what the Bears need is to see some reason that they were right. They need to say, oh, they got out of the way, and then see a bearish sample come, and it gets a pretty decent hit, and it's like, this structure is working, everything's lining up, things are good, and then actually let it run. Let the Bears have a little back, and then that will be, I don't know, a good faith sign. And so the reason they'll come back and play is because the Bears will make some money. And the whole point of elasticity is to allow the counterparty to make some money on the burn-off so that they can keep playing. That's the whole point of a burn-off. It's beneficial for everybody. The Bulls get better prices, the Bears get to take some money, and then the Bears take profits, the Bulls retake control, and then take it up. And so everybody's happy. But that's also the time when, if the Bears are going to be little scallywags, that's their chance to get in also, because they have a little control. So only if the Bulls give them a chance. Otherwise, they will just be jumping the gun again. They're too early. So I think the market's going to say something like, okay, Bears, you're right. You were just a little early. The Bulls will move out of the way. The Bears, some of the Bears aren't going to want to participate. They're going to go, nah, I don't want to do this again, right? That's what you do. I don't want to do, I'm not going to play today. And then the Bears get a sample, and it works. And they're like, oh my gosh, now it's working. It just didn't work the times I was trading. Now it's working, right? You've been there. It never works when you do it, and then when you don't do it, it runs. And that's, I think, kind of the thing I'm thinking here is they've gotten so destroyed that we could probably let it work and nobody's going to show up because they're all burnt. And then it runs, and then they're all like, oh my gosh, we were right all along. And then they'll try and chase it, and that'll fuel us for the next leg up. And I think that's a sensible place after what we saw for the Bears to be at. We need to give them a chance to, honestly, it's just to feel like crap because they're not going to participate in the time when they should. And it's just that we've all been here. Like, that, I'm not drawing this conclusion because it's like, it's just, we've all done this. Like, and I think that's a good, yeah, finally, it's finally, and it's finally working, and and that can help fuel the Bears coming in and being active. And I think that's why I think they'll play. You understand, right? Like, it's like, well, it's not so much that they're dumb, but they're human, and we can predict that. We can predict that they're gonna think that way. So Jim, why not? I like it would it would destroy so many people because it was so just like that taking care of this correction before we see any further correction would just ruin everyone. There's so many people who just believed in that whole pandemic. They believed in the death rate. They believed in it was going to take out all the business. The world was over. They believed it. It was the last days, which I just want you to know that every day is the last days. It is always the last days. Um, and I think a lot of people just went for it, and it just was stupid. It was just overblown. So it would just be great to just fold this all the way back up. Everyone's going to go, this is what they'll say. This is what they'll say at the end. They'll say, news bars always retrace. Obviously, I knew that. I'm like, oh yeah, sure you did. So there's that. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone over that, I wanted to bring up something that I'm going to be paying attention to that I think is important. What's coming up next for the series of events? I haven't really talked a whole lot about in this stream, but I'm going to bring it up right now. I think that the next thing to come up is what I'm calling entrenchment. So we got the coronavirus was the cause of the suffering. So he's a causal relationship. Trump was correlated with the suffering. And the riots, whether intentional or not, doesn't matter, as they have effectively erased the memory of everyone in the United States. We all don't even know. We're all asking who COVID is. We're trying to figure out who that is. Is that a guy from like a new reality show, COVID? Is that his name? All I know is rioting is happening, and that's all people think about it. So what's important about that is now is an opportunity to start correlating Trump with the suffering. So we've seen that a lot on Twitter. Like I typed in the word racist and his name came up first. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're correlating. They're saying that Trump is the cause of the suffering when he was correlated with it, not cause. It was, the pandemic and everything associated with that caused it. Trump was correlated. So we get rid of the word coronavirus. Nobody remembers it anymore. Just don't talk about it. And then we could say it was Trump's fault. Well, what's next? Well, I've been thinking about this, and it's hard to kind of see, but I think that what's going to happen next is if you go into your workplace and your boss tells you you have to wear a mask. The problem here is that a lot of people don't think the masks are effective, only because of reasons and data, not other things. It's just because of that. And so you think the mask, so let's say that you don't believe it's effective and your boss doesn't believe it's effective. If you don't have a mask on and he doesn't have a mask on, and somebody who's on the up and up, comes into the store and then they get sick, they could sue your company for not complying with maybe the CDC or the World Health Organization's recommendations, and they could put that in there, and it could cause some lawsuits and issues. So we get to this interesting situation where your boss is lying to you. He or she doesn't believe you should wear a mask, but they're going to enforce the procedure anyway. You don't believe you should wear a mask, but they'll enforce the procedure anyway. And then people come into your place of business and they don't believe they should wear a mask, but they're being told they have to anyway. And we get in this unique situation where that we have a bunch of procedural and legal or laws being entrenched on us, while nobody really thinks that they should. And you get this deception that comes in that's going to divide the leadership from the people. And I think the next step is to push that. That's my thought. So think about this. The reason that a business would want to maintain any procedural things that are left over from the pandemic or the rioting is to protect themselves from liability, not because they believe in it. It's a liable thing. So then you have to say, well, what are the credible sources saying? And it's the credible sources, the ones who have the ability to make statements that could hold up in court, that are going to have a lot of sway here, because those credible sources will say things, the businesses will be concerned, and they will push their people to do things that they themselves don't believe in. They're just afraid of liability. And I'm calling this entrenchment. It's where you get pushed into, and we all entrench into patterns of behavior, into maybe laws that get put into place, into relationships between different sectors. All of this is getting put onto us, and now we're going to have to be faced with how entrenched we get because everyone's afraid of liabilities. And this is going to be a big deal because I think entrenching the world entrenching the United States like that is going to further divide people. And so if you were one way or the other, you believed or you didn't or whatever, I think that we're pushing that. So how do you push that? If I were going to fund this, let's just say I had $100 million, like Bloomberg blew on his campaign, maybe we had $100 million. This is what I would do. I would go and try and sue as many businesses as I could, big ones publicly, as noisy as possible. Go get prominent people to kick and pay. What I would just sue them publicly, so everyone can see that, all the businesses can see that I have a lot of money and I'm suing companies for non-compliance because I can, and that would cause that pressure. The businesses would put the pressure. And then I would publicize as much as I could about the riots and the suppression and the racism and how that people are divided and humans are not the same. We're all different, all that kind of crap. And that way you get this business pressure from the top and you get this like individualism pressure from the bottom. And I think it'll create a lot of division among people. That's what I would do. And I think I could do it. At this point, I think you don't even have to win the lawsuit. Just the fact that a business is concerned that they could be taken to court. And one of the things we know about court is that win or lose, it can wreck your life because it can last so long. So I think that's what I'm anticipating. Then I want to see people come out and say things. We're going to be watching those credible sources because I think they're going to be coming out with statements, and those statements are going to be able to be used to fuel this. And the point, I think, is to create some division. And we've just had, I think we're going to have a really heated election coming up. It's just going to be like playing with fire. We've already seen that for some reason the riots caused the saddest day in Twitter ever, the day they started. And it was interesting to me because it was like, oh, we had riots over some police being mean, like we hear all the time. But in this particular case, it was on video, so it was extra mean. And it's like, well, what about all the other police brutality problems that we've had? This isn't like the first one. It's just the first one everybody was looking at. Anyway, so there was rioting and looting, and then it was like less than 24 hours later, and the entire United States was suddenly being well documented and rioting and looting. It wasn't like a fire that started. It was like an on-off switch. It was like, and that changed public opinion overnight. In fact, I think it changed public opinion a little too fast. It was too fast. We went from the pandemic is a problem, people are victims of government oversight, and in less than a day, every single person was saying, well, no, it's like worked so well. I was like, wait a second. No, that's where we got to. Where we came from was that the government was struggling. They were the victim, trying to make sure, all the states were like, let's do this correctly. Oh, we want to make sure we get everything open. And they were trying to make the states the victim, and the people kept not going, or they kept not staying home, right? It was like, you keep going out, the government's the victim, we keep making all these people victim, blah, blah. And it flipped. And after the riots, it was the people were the victim and the government was the perpetrator. It was like 180 overnight, so fast. Holy cow. And like that, we all forgot about coronavirus. I don't think anybody cares anymore. So now we got to move into entrenchment, which is going to help push things apart. And I think this is going to come with a lot of unnecessary Trump blamery. Like, he's the cause. People say, what about coronavirus? They say, I don't even know what that is. Trump ruined your life. Like, why are you worried about other things? Trump is the problem. In his presidency, you all lost your jobs. Isn't that terrible? And we'll be like, wait, the cause of that suffering was pandemic. Trump was just correlated with it. He was the president during. He didn't cause it. What's Corona? What? No. Trump's presidency ruined you. And that's, I think, going to be the twist. We've seen a lot of that already. So that's where I think we're at. So watch out. Watch for this stuff. We're going to see things coming out from credible sources, court cases from people suing businesses over non-compliance. And then we'll see businesses scrambling to try and comply because they don't want to get sued. And that is going to divide the leadership from the people. And it's going to cause, well, I don't know if it's going to be a huge cause, but I think it's going to push us in that direction of just more people spread out, more people upset with each other, more of this insanity. If you had told me this is where we're going to be last year, I'd have been like, what? It's insanity. So those are my thoughts. Not a prediction, just that's my opinion. I think that is a sensible direction to go if you're Joe Biden and you want to try and beat Trump. And, try and divide people so you have a chance. Basically, I think what they're going to try to do is, I think Biden's going to try and do what Trump did to Hillary. You remember that? It's like, why did Trump win? It's because Hillary was such a monster that people voted for Trump. I think just because it was like, well, I don't like Trump, but Hillary can't win. That woman has a past on her. And I think Biden's going to try and pull a Trump on Trump, which good luck. But I think that's what he's going to try and demonize Trump so bad that people will just not even look at Trump. They just have a default that says, well, we can't have, or Biden, they'll say, we can't have Trump win, so just vote for anyone else on the ballot. Just anyone else, just not. I think that's the objective here. I'm not entirely certain that either of these candidates is great, and I don't understand why it is that we have such a hard time finding people who aren't just the worst. I mean, I know people get things blown out of proportion, but I don't know. I am, yeah. My objective is to assess every side of everything and try and actually just make the most rational outcome. I think the riots actually made sense because we needed to get rid of coronavirus. That was pretty clear that the Democratic Party wasn't going to have a chance if they couldn't erase the memories of coronavirus, because then they could blame Trump. So when the riots started happening, I was like, oh, okay, well, this actually was fine. That's normal. They did a much better job than I thought. I mean, I thought it would take a week. It took a day. That or people just are not listening. So whatever's coming, I think we're going to see this division coming up, and that's what I think is the next most sensible move for the United. So the big thing for me will be a lawsuit. We start to see a lawsuit or two where it's like so-and-so is suing Target or Walmart or somebody big and for non-compliance, and they're terrible people and they're causing the rioting, blah, 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 and that court case drags on and costs lots of money. That's going to be the big sign to me to be like, okay, so this is the direction that they're moving. But I've been looking over this over and over and over, and I think it's a sensible next step. Whether it was intentional or not, I don't know. But an opportunistic person with a couple $100 million, this would be an easy pick, in my opinion. So anyway, selected, elected. What's the difference again? Oh, yeah. Anyway, so that's where we're at. We blew out the Bears side. I think there's some need to let the Bears have a little bit, give them some hope. We've got a little bit of a perspective possibly on what the events will look like politically in the country. And I think that's going to be useful because I think if you keep that in mind, I think that's an indication of risk appetite. If they continue to do predictable things to control the narrative in the country, that tells me that they have an appetite for risk, which means they're going to be playing for real money in the markets. I think that sadly, I think that'll be good for me to see these things play out, because that means I will be able to participate, recognizing what they're doing, and it will make me money. So yeah. I know. Berger said that he says the candidates are not selected, they're elected. And I was joking and say, what's the difference? But he's saying there's lots of verifiable history that that's what happens. And it's like, yeah, I know. Well, and the thing is hopefully they don't gain too much power, is that we have a broken up power system where the power is distributed. So they come and they go, and nobody makes changes that are too significant or can't be reversed by the next presidency or something. And that's, Trump has done some stuff, but nothing permanent other than maybe piss off China, which I think they're pissed. So anyway, I don't want to get into politics and stuff. I just want to say that I think that objectively what's coming up is that we'll start to see these narratives which are going to cause more division between people. That's what I think makes sense coming up over the next week or two would be a reasonable thing to do if you were going to try and fund a Democratic campaign in the United States right now. That's what I would do. I think it's pretty obvious if you're looking at it that way. So I don't know that it's going to happen. I've been trying to figure out what the next step is. I really prefer to be a step ahead. I really hate it when news just hits me. And I'm like, I had no idea. Like, what the heck? That drives me nuts. So I'm trying to figure out where they're going to go with this and why they would do that and how it would work and stuff. And I think this is a sensible thing to do for a campaign manager trying to get a Democratic candidate up there. And the great thing is you don't have to really attack Trump. You just don't say anything. Just sit back. He has this tendency to say things that are so easy for the news to spin, and he does things that are just like, Trump, I don't know if you're good or you're bad, but really like you to prepare your speeches a little bit. So, yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree that having power people, Berger was saying that people in power are pre-selected from the masses, and I don't necessarily think that's what I think that it's outside of the scope of my ability to really measure. I can measure the outcomes, and sort of predict next steps and stuff like that. I don't have the scope to say that I can see much other than that. It's tough. It's tough to say that this person was selected there. But what I can say is I can see how you're preparing the market, and I can see that you're preparing political opinion and stuff, and I can start making inferences there and stay a step or two ahead of it. And in that instance, when you're able to make predictions or expectations, and then those things continually happen, it's the same thing as the market. It's a scientific model. You continually make these expectations and reevaluate until you're into a point where it's like, okay, I see what's going on here. That's kind of where we're at. So yeah, anyway, that was maybe a little more off topic. I just wanted to give my expectations about what I'm going to be watching for in the news coming up, because I think it's going to be an indicator of what's going on here. All right. I hope this was helpful and not too off topic for everyone. I'll see you next week.